Today at Deutsche Auto Parts, we're going to be going over how to install a Forge blow-off valve on a MK7 GTI. Okay, so before we get into our install, I want to talk about a few quick notes about blow-off valves. If you're not familiar with what blow-off valves do or what their purpose is, we actually shot a video talking about blow-off valves 101. It should give you all the details you want to know to understand blow-off valves. We'll put a link to that here so you can check it out and understand more. In regards to this specific blow-off valve, this one is made by Forge. They also offer a diverter valve if you are looking to go with a recirculation function instead of blowing off the atmosphere like this. We'll put a link to the blow-off valve here and both of them in the description below. Now, a blow-off valve, obviously, the main benefit of doing this versus a diverter valve is you get to hear that noise. And so if you want to have that noise, having a blow-off valve is the only way to do so. Now, aside from that, when you get into performance, this blow-off valve is rated up to 600 horsepower, which means no matter how much boost you throw at it, it's going to hold the power. Now, it remains to be seen what the limitations are of the factory valve as far as I know. So we're upgrading this just to ensure that ours is going to hold boost. Again, we just want to say thank you so much for watching. Any support you offer us through purchases of parts like this or any others helps support making videos just like this one. We can start by removing the 7mm clamp that's on the back of this hose that mounts here. This will give us the ability to swing this pipe out of the way. Now, one thing to note on this, we have an intake on this car, so we probably have a little more flexibility with this. If you had a stock air box, you might want to remove this pipe to make it access a little bit easier. Okay, now we can disconnect the electrical connector. When you do so, all you're doing is going to grab onto this tab, push backwards. Usually you can push forward on the connector and then pop it up real easy. We're then going to take out our 5mm bolts, 5mm Allens that hold on the diverter valve to the turbo. It's going to help to use a ball socket when doing this to ensure you can get the right angle to get in there. Now, one important note I want to make about this is when you're taking these out, I would start with the bottom one and make sure that everything is still in there so you can make sure you don't drop that down, because if you lose that while you're doing this, you're going to have a tough time. All right, so now we're under the hood. We have the engine cover removed. We have the stock DV removed. We've taken our Forge blow-off valve. It comes with these seals uninstalled. We've popped them in place, and we're going to mount this valve in place. So we're going to face both of those vacuum nipples up so that we can access them with the lines we need to So we're going to face all them up so we have the lines that we need to install for the vacuum ports, and so we can access them once they're installed. Now we're going to put in this bottom one. Now again, the bottom one is a really tough one to get in there, so be super careful you don't drop it when you're installing it. Okay, so we have our plate that's provided with a Forge blow-off valve or DV, and then we have the solenoid valve which actually actuates the valve. So it's going to come with these two 3mm Allens. You're going to slide this in place and then put the other one in and then tighten them both down. All right, so now we're going to remove this vacuum line. We're going to use a small 90-degree pick and kind of get underneath this. This will allow you to kind of get this loose. Just be super careful because some of these picks are really sharp, and if you're not careful, you could puncture the actual hose. And just so you know, this is going to be our engine vacuum source for the valve. All right, so here we have our bracket that's provided with the valve. We're going to slide this in place and then bolt the lower bolt in place. Obviously, we wouldn't recommend doing this over your engine bay, but we're shooting this video. And we're going to tighten those down. And this was the orientation that we found to be the best for this, with the hole that you mount in the top and then the plug on the left-hand side and these two ports on the right-hand side. Okay, now that we have that in place, we're going to take this valve and then mount it in place on the hole that is just behind the vacuum pump on the engine, and it's a 5mm Allen. We're just going to get it threaded in place so that we have access to it and plenty of mobility. So here we have the T-fitting. We have a small piece of hose that we cut to mount this in place. It is something that they talked about in their instructions, cutting this actual hose. That is an option, but I know for a lot of people they're not going to want to do that. So if you cut a small piece of the hose provided with the kit, you should be able to slide this part of the 90 on here into that hose, and then you can take this and slide that in place and then kind of tuck this, twist it so that this hose is kind of in its original form for the most part. Now we're going to run this to our valve, which will show the diagram provided here with pictures of where each port goes to. Okay, so what we're going to do in this particular situation, just to make it so you don't have to take things on and off a bunch of times, we're going to take our hose, slide it in place. We're going to kind of move our valve down, and then we're going to give ourselves enough slack and then cut the hose while it's in place. And we can slide our vacuum line on, and now we have our vacuum source. Okay, so now we're going to route the other lines. We're going to mount this one to the plastic 90 that comes off that solenoid valve, and we're going to route that underneath here so that when we put our intake back on, that nothing's in the way. And this goes to this top one right here. Again, we'll show our diagram to make this as easy as possible. One thing to note, obviously, you want to make sure when you route these lines, you do so that nothing kinks real hard, because if it does, you might have an issue where you're not getting engine vacuum properly if it kinks. Now we're going to get the bottom hose, and we're going to mount this last hose in place. Now, one thing, obviously, depending on how you want to route these lines, you can clean them up as you see fit. So all of our lines are installed. We can tighten up this bracket now. I'm going to go crazy tightening it. All it is a small valve. Again, you can double check once you do that, that maybe you got no lines rubbing on anything and everything is moving freely. All right, now that we have all of our lines in place, we're going to mount our adapter harness in place as well. All we're going to do is take the original plug from the DV and plug it into this harness that's provided with the kit. Pretty simple. plug it in place, and then run it down underneath and plug it into the solenoid valve. And everything should be ready for reinstallation.